This video is for people who are having any kind of problem with their D-pad on an Xbox Elite Series 2 controller. For example, one of the directions may not be working, or maybe it pushes in one of those directions on its own, or maybe it's inconsistent. It sometimes registers your push, and sometimes it doesn't. The causes of these issues vary, but it's usually dirt buildup, or worn parts, or broken parts, or even a combination of these things. There's really no way to match up a symptom with a specific cause, so today I'm going to show you numerous solutions you can try, starting with simple ones that don't involve going inside the controller, and then moving on to more complex solutions that do involve going inside the controller. Start with the first thing, see if it worked, and if not, move on to the next thing. With any luck, you won't need to use this entire video. The first thing to do before doing anything in this video is to remove the D-pad covering, then take a small piece of cardboard from anything you have laying around, like a packaged product from your kitchen or whatever, and make a wedge out of it, like so. And then take a corner of that wedge, and then stick it into the gaps around the D-pad and move it around. The idea here is that there could be caked on dirt inside the gaps in there, or there could be a single thing like a fingernail lodged in there, and this would dislodge it. After you've scraped around for a little bit, turn the controller upside down and tap on the back right above where the D-pad is. I'm having you do this because you likely scraped off some gunk in there and we want it to fall out. See if this helped. If not, move on to the next method. This time we're going to do something similar, but instead of scraping, we are going to blow. This is best accomplished with a straw, so grab one and just blow into the gaps around the D-pad. Push on the D-pad in various directions as you do this. If you don't have a straw, you can just roll up a piece of paper or cardboard, or you can just put your mouth right on the D-pad and just blow that way. See if that helped. If not, go on to the next solution. Instead of blowing this time, we're going to vacuum. This is pretty self-explanatory. Just if you have a vacuum cleaner with a detachable hose like this one, just turn it on and place the end of it over the D-pad. And you'll want to push in various directions on the D-pad as you do this. Full suction might be a little bit too much, so if you have the ability to turn the suction down on your vacuum cleaner, go ahead and do that. It's also a good idea to remove the tops of the thumbsticks, as I've done right here. That way they don't get sucked down into the vacuum cleaner. I keep telling you to check to see if this worked. One way to do that would be to power on your console or whatever you're gaming with, and just seeing if the controller is functioning correctly within the game itself. However, it's probably going to be faster if you test your controller on hardwaretester.com. It's a free site. You just bring it up, and when you first go into it, you'll want to go to gamepad tester, which is just a sub area of the site. When you click into it, it's going to try to detect a controller and you need to hook it up. You can use a USB cord if you want, or you can connect via Bluetooth. It'll detect it and show this diagram here. It does call it an Xbox 360 controller. I'm not sure why it says that, but either way, this will still work to test out your buttons. Every time you press on the D-pad, it'll light up an image of it on the right, and on the left, it'll change one of the values from a 0 to a 1. So you can keep pushing and see if it ever misses or if it ever gets stuck or whatever. It's a more precise way of testing for an issue compared to testing it within a game. This next method is a little weird, and I predict that most of you will not find it very useful for your situation, but this is the last thing I can suggest before we have to go inside the controller. And this solution is to either deactivate part of the D-pad or to remap some of the D-pad to some of the other buttons. This is all easy to do using the Xbox console itself. You can also do this on the Xbox Accessories app if you're on a PC. Just make sure when you open the app that you also sign in to your Xbox account, or you won't be able to access the extra features that this controller has. But anyway, if you're on console, hit the Xbox logo button that's on your controller, and this little menu will pop up. Now, hopefully with your D-pad issue, you can still navigate these menus. Keep in mind that you can also use the left analog stick to navigate these menus as well. tab over to the last selection on the right by hitting the RB button. And on that submenu, select Settings, then Devices and Connections on the left, and Controllers and Headsets on the right. Then you'll see an image of your controller right there. If you're on the Xbox Accessories app, you'll see a similar screen right when you open the app. Whichever one you're using, you'll want to go to Configure. Here you can create and edit 3 different profiles for 3 different remappings, basically. It's very likely you already have a profile listed, and it'll probably say Profile 1. If you do, you can highlight it and select the pencil icon here to edit that existing profile. Or you can just create a whole new profile, which is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to select New Profile, and here I'm just going to keep it named Profile 2. On the lower left, you can see the selections for the D-pad. First, let me show you how to deactivate any one of those. I'll highlight one of them and select A. I'll hit A again on this screen. And here, I'm going to go all the way to the bottom of the list and select Unmapped and hit A. I'll hit B to back out of this screen. And it now shows that I've deactivated the D-pad right. If I want to assign D-pad right to another button, I need to choose one of the other buttons on this layout. I'll go ahead and choose Y, so I'll highlight it and I'll hit A to go into it. I'll hit A again on this screen, and then I'll select D-pad right from this screen and hit A. I'll hit B to back out of this screen, and it's now showing that change on the diagram here. I'll hit B to back out of this screen. Profile 2, which I just configured, is out to the side here. I'm now going to place it into a slot. With Profile 2 highlighted, I'm going to hit A and change it to slot 2. It now indicates it's in slot 2. Then I need to go to my controller and hit this center button right here, and I need to keep hitting it until 2 lights are shown right here. That indicates I'm using the second slot. So now the remapping is in place. For this method, we are going to remove this outer covering right here. And after that, we're going to disassemble the D-pad itself and clean it and inspect it and replace it if we need to. Getting that cover off is a challenge. It's not screwed on. You have to pry it off. And the thing is, it is stuck on there using tabs and a little bit of adhesive. First, remove the thumbsticks and remove the D-pad. And as a precaution, you might want to remove these bumpers from the back. They might get snagged or something as we're working the controller here. You just have to tilt them and they'll come right off. Take a look at that gap between the lower half of the controller and the upper half that we're trying to peel off. And if you see any crud in there, scrape that crud out. That crud is like a glue, and it's going to make it harder to separate if we leave it there. I suggest you start prying in this area of the controller, just below the D-pad, and work your way to the left. There is a powerful tab in the upper handle area right here. If you pry it just right, that tab will become disattached. Once that happens, the rest is a lot easier. Just note there is a weak point, and that's between the B button and the edge. There's very little plastic there, and if you apply too much pressure at that point, you could cause a crack like this one. Now, it's just a cosmetic crack, but I imagine you don't want this to happen to your controller, so that's why I'm having you start things on the left and working your way to the right. If you started on the right, it's more likely to crack. Once it gets separated enough, you just need to pull it apart. You could see some of the adhesive here. That's kind of like a gum. You just have to separate that. The good news is if you have to go back inside again, it should be easier to separate next time. Also note that one of the tabs may break in this process. If that happens, I don't think it'll be a big deal. It should still go back together just fine because there are multiple tabs. But if a piece does break off, make sure it didn't land inside the controller, or else that can cause some issues. So just make sure you pick up any pieces that broke. At this point, look at the metal and plastic that's around the D-pad, and if you see any huge pieces of debris or anything, go ahead and remove that and clean it up. but we're going to go further into it. We're going to remove that metal frame. It's a little bit tricky. You need something small and pointy. You might be able to use a small nail, like the kind you use to hang a picture or something, and you need to press it into the gap down here and open up the gap on one side and then open up the gap on the other side. Then gently pry on it until the top comes out. It helps if you shake it a little bit. You can set that aside for now. Now the D-pad will come straight off. You just pick it up and go ahead and flip it over. You're going to see some nubs out to the side. Inspect those and see if any of them are damaged. Keep in mind that they're not all the same length, but if one looks smashed or worn down, it's time to get a replacement. And you can either get one from another controller, or if I find a suitable replacement on Amazon, I'll put a link to one in the description. You can also clean those knobs if they look dirty. Now turn your attention to what was underneath the D-pad, and if yours is like mine, you have some debris under there. I have some hair from a cat, it looks like. You should be able to just use a Q-tip and get a lot of that dirt out of there, if there is any. And notice that middle piece is greased a little bit. I would keep it there unless you don't see any grease at all. You might want to add some grease. Let's put that part back together. Place the D-pad into place. It has to be oriented the same way, but don't worry, it doesn't let you place it in there if you have it turned the wrong direction. So just keep turning it until you get it the right direction, if that makes sense. Now for the metal piece, we're going to put it back on the opposite way we took it off. Insert the top part of it in first. And when that goes in securely, go ahead and press on the bottom part. And then just move around the D-pad and make sure it feels okay. So right now, you should be able to retest it without putting the outer cover back on. If it still did not improve your situation, there is one more thing to try. This is where things get very risky. You may want to watch this entire segment before deciding whether or not to go through with it. This time we're going to go deeper inside and remove the board and inspect the contact points that are underneath the D-pad and do a few other things. The first thing we need to do is take the bottom cover off the controller. So we need to remove these 6 screws. If nobody has been inside before, one of those screws will be covered by a sticker. You need a size 8 Torx security bit. The security bit part of it is very important because that means there's a little dimple in the middle of the bit, and as far as I know, you cannot turn these screws unless you have that little dimple in there. With the screws removed, we can now begin separating the two pieces. There's really no good way to describe it, you just have to pry it out. And this part we'll just set aside. During all this, one of the vibration motors may have come out. If so, just stick it back in the holder. All you have to do is just stuff it in there. So we are going to remove this whole top mechanism. There's a center part here, and we'll remove that first. It's held on by these 2 little tab things here. We need to pry those up, and once they're loose, we need to pull up on the back of that center piece. There we go. Now we're going to remove the rest of that top piece. It has a tab on each side. Here's what those tabs look like when it's already out. So you gotta pry up one side and just get that side loose, and then pry up the other side. Some people may need to stick a tool into that little tab and pry it up a little bit. What we have to do next is remove these 2 wires from that back board. Snap them out of place, and then pull them up from these little holders that are holding them onto the board. We just want to get them unattached from the blue board. Leave them attached to the green board. Now we need to separate the green board from the blue board. In order to do that, we first have to remove the top from the analog stick right here. The left one is okay. The right one, however, doesn't have enough clearance. It is screwed on there like a bolt, The thing is though, they also have adhesive in there, and sometimes when people try to unscrew this, it wrecks their analog stick. You may not want to take this risk, but I will say if you heat it up first, you're more likely to be successful. I recommend using a hairdryer, but you don't want to heat up the whole entire controller. You just want the heat to be on the analog stick. What I do is take a thick piece of cardboard and cut a hole in it around the same size as that cap, and then stick the cap through it, and then as you pass the hairdryer over top of it, it'll put most of the heat on the cap. And when it gets hot enough, turn it with some pliers. Once you get enough turns on it, let it cool off and then just do the rest with your fingers. And then you want to downgrade to a size 6 Torx security bit and remove these 2 screws right here. You then have to pull up on the board and pull it out. This can be done without disconnecting these wires that lead to the motors right here. Just leave the board flipped up like this. Remove this jack right here if it hasn't fallen off already, and just lay it aside. Now we're going to remove all the screws holding down the blue board. And now we can just pull the blue board out. So look at the section of the board underneath where the D-pad was, and you'll see 4 contact points. Go ahead and press down on each of them. You should be able to click all 4 of them. If the problem one is not clicking like the other ones, then you need to replace this part. It's a giant sticker that you'll have to peel off and replace it with the other one. Now, if your problematic button is clicking properly, then there's one more thing you can do. You can peel up the part of the sticker with that contact point, and you can clean it with alcohol. Don't get any alcohol on the sticky part, or else it's not going to stick back properly. Clean the contact point on the sticker side itself and on the board, and then just give it a long time to dry, because once you put that sticker in there, that moisture is going to be trapped in there, and it's probably going to mess things up if you don't allow it to dry. I'm hoping one of these things has helped you. The rest of this video will show how to put things back together again. So now I'm going to show you how to put everything back together. If this padding came loose, then go ahead and push it back into position. We're going to stick the blue board back in. Then reinsert these screws. Put this jack back into place. The little metal contacts need to face upward. Then we're going to push the green board back into place. Put these 2 screws back into the corners. Then snap those wires back into their connectors. Now this can be a big pain in the butt because the parts are so small and you have to have it situated perfectly to snap it into place. And then push the wires back into their holders. Next, you want to screw this analog stick back on. Start off by just using your fingers to do it. And near the end, you want to tighten it up with some pliers, but do not over tighten it. We're going to snap this long piece back onto the buttons at the top. That's basically how you do it. You snap it back into place. And then the middle piece will snap back into place. Before you go further, just push on the buttons and make sure they're working fine. You may not have snapped everything back into place if it's not. Put the bottom back onto the controller. And put these 6 screws back in. Then snap the top back onto the controller. So I hope you got a lot out of this video. If it did work or if it didn't work, please let me know in the comments. Have a great day, everybody.